Thanks for tuning in to the Teen Sports Podcast Network, where teens throughout the U.S. and their show guests tackle today's sports topics and issues from a teen perspective. And now, here's your host of the Teen Sports Podcast Network, Illinois, Andrew Kish.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Teen Sports Podcast Network, Illinois. I'm your host, Andrew Kish. In today's episode, my guest is Charles Davis, current analyst for the NFL on CBS. Thanks for taking the time to be my guest today, Charles.
Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. Trust you're well.
I'm super thrilled to have you today, Charles. It's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get started, though, I'm going to give our viewers and listeners a quick rundown of today's game plan. In the first half, we're going to be talking about Mr. Charles Davis's backstory and his career so far. And in the second half, we're going to be talking about today's topic and issue, pro athletes as role models. Should athletes have the expectation of being a good role model? More on that later, though. So I know you've had a lot of experience in the sports broadcasting world and some experience in the pro athletics world as well, Charles. And, you know, for someone like yourself who's super into American football, it's got to be an incredible feeling to have such a profound voice in this realm. So my first question for you then is, did that kid from New Paltz, New York, ever dream he'd be on NFL on CBS and one of the voices of Madden?
Both excellent questions. And I don't know that my voice is profound. That's for sure. There's a lot of voices in our space and medium now, a lot more than when I was growing up as a kid, where there were very few voices and top of the food chain dominated it. Now, all of us can pretty much have a voice and be involved because of the way technology works. Our ability to have our own broadcasts, podcasts, telecasts, things that can get out there to where people can find them and see them. So definitely, I don't think about it as quite that much. But to the second part of your question, I think I dreamed of it. Did I ever think it would actually be something that came to fruition? NFL on CBS, one of the voices on Madden. I don't know that I saw that. I don't know that actually came into actual being in terms of my mind. But did I dream of things like that? Absolutely. When I was a kid, I sure did.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my entire life, I've had different things in my mind about sports. You know, growing up, I'm like, oh, you know, as a Chicago Bulls fan, I was like, oh, I want to be like Derrick Rose. But then I realized I wasn't great at sports, and then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be an announcer. I'll be like a Stephen A. Smith type. But you know, that imagination never goes away growing up, but I couldn't imagine what it's be like to finally get into that situation where you get your own voice in that everybody can listen into. So then I have another question for you. So, you know, you were a safety at the University of Tennessee, so you have experience as an athlete in the broadcasting field that you're part of. So did being an athlete prepare you for being in the booth today?
It did. It certainly helped because my experiences helped me with the game that I'm doing and the game that I'm around and different situations that come up. Because I played the same sport that I'm broadcasting, those experiences were natural. They came with me. They are part of me. And I recognize them in other people at times. So that definitely helps as I go along. Now, when I go across sports, when I was doing other things, when I was doing basketball and baseball and all sorts of other things, those experiences weren't necessarily apples to apples, but they were relatable, especially in terms of competition, preparation, you know, performance. All those things are universal. It's just that the sport may be different.
Absolutely. I can kind of relate to that because, you know, growing up, I was a big basketball guy, like I just mentioned with Derrick Rose being my idol and all that. So when I've started transitioning to like want to be in the sports broadcasting world. And, you know, growing up, I didn't know much about other sports, but now I'm starting to get more, you know, my mind's more integrated into those other things because originally it was all just basketball. That was my knowledge. So I understand what you're saying in that regard. So another thing I have for you, I understand one of the reasons you went to Tennessee was because of Condridge Holloway, the known as the Artful Dodger. He was the first black quarterback to play in the SEC, and I imagine that had to have been a real inspiration for you coming out of high school. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you've done excellent homework on me, for sure. But you're exactly right. I saw Condridge Holloway play, and I was a young kid. I was 8 or 9 years old back in New Paltz, New York, and Tennessee versus UCLA season opener. I think it was 1974. And so to watch him go out and play and realize what I was seeing was a little bit unusual. Is that a black starting quarterback? Like, whoa, what's going on? And my father had played college football at an HBCU called Bluefield State in West Virginia, which is since integrated. But at that time, my dad had been a quarterback, and being in the state of West Virginia, there was no way West Virginia University is going to recruit him to be a quarterback. So he had to find it somewhere else. And I just knew something was different that day. Something was exciting. And I got hooked. And I got hooked on Condridge and had the number 7 jersey in Orange, Tennessee Orange, and always said, hey, I'm going to go there and play quarterback for Tennessee. And I didn't play quarterback, but I did go to Tennessee. It was all because of what I saw that day. That was my inspiration. That's what got me started.
That's incredible. And, that's a very humble beginning as well. So having that experience, understanding okay, as a child, I saw these things and this is what inspired me to do this. What was that feeling like when you got into the college and be able to do something that inspired you from a young age?
Yeah, at first it was extremely, how would I say it? It was uncertain in the beginning because coming from New Paltz, New York, there wasn't a natural nexus with the University of Tennessee. It wasn't like it a lot of time in my area recruiting kids and didn't have much of a footprint or a presence. So I had to make myself known to them, and myself and my high school coach and my dad, we got together and crafted a letter, and we sent to Tennessee and asked them to evaluate me, and they did. And then they started recruiting me, and now all of a sudden it became something that possibly could be real. And they made an offer and I was able to go. Wow, I'm living my dream. Then reality kicked in when I reported as a freshman, and now I'm seeing all these other great athletes from across the country coming together in my freshman class. Then the varsity shows up and you're like, oh my goodness, here are the real football players. The reality kicked in that, hey, the fantasy part of this thing is over. What's going to be your ultimate reality? Are you going to be able to adapt? Are you going to be able to adjust? Are you going to be able to integrate yourself into it? Are you going to find a way to make yourself useful as a player? All those things now had to come into focus. No longer was it a great book I was reading. No longer was it something in my head where I'm going to play at Tennessee. Now I had to find out a way to make it happen. So ultimately it worked out, but it was interesting that the stages along the way to get me there certainly weren't like a made-for-TV movie, as we used to say back when I was a kid, or any sort of a movie that you would put together now that it always works out in the end. You know what I mean? It takes a little bit of stuff along the way, maybe a few bumps and challenges we don't see when we're showing that on the big screen.
Absolutely. I mean that makes sense. So then obviously you had a successful, college stint. So then you moved on to sports broadcasting later on. And one thing I've thought about is, watching your television work, you've obviously have a great impact on the youth. Do you really grasp the impact you've had towards aspiring broadcasters?
I don't know that I fully grasp it. I think all of us have a pretty decent idea that what we say and do could have an impact on people. But you're never really sure who they're grasping. There's so many of us out there now, as we talked about earlier. Here you are getting started in your career. You already have an impact on the marketplace that never would have happened, during my time frame, because we didn't have the same type of outlets. This is not a get off your lawn type of a speech by any stretch. But what it is that opportunity, interest, outlets for all of this, where people can find you, more extensive than they've ever been. And that's part of the growth of our society, part of the growth of our business, part of the growth of the industry. And it's really kind of cool, right? Because that cute little 6-year-old that we see that's featured on the news, we might have heard about that person, in your local community way back in the day. Now that person go national. What do they call it? Going viral, right? I'm trying to keep up with you youngsters, okay? So I'm trying to get there. Those things can happen now. People can have their statements, their causes, their reactions to things recorded instantly. You can do it on your phone, post it, boom, might get a reaction out there. So for me, looking at it as an old school guy, I'm hoping to have an impact on people who are coming up through there. I'm hoping it's a positive impact, but also realizing they have different role models across the board now. And what's really cool about it is every make, model, species of person is available to be that role model now. it's not just little girls who look up and see Mina Kimes doing her thing, talking about NFL football so expertly. It's men seeing it as well, boys seeing it as well. So that's got to have an impact across the board on it, right? Impact on all of us going back and forth across different things with respect for each other, I think is pretty cool. So I hope we're having a positive impact. But the beauty is understanding that I had, we'll just use a number. Let's say there were 10 to 15 people that I would see on a daily basis that would impact me that way as a kid. Multiply that by what, a factor of 20, 30, 40 for people coming up now. And that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I couldn't imagine not having all of these like ideas and influences, because it had to have been much more difficult for you to make your mark, because now I have all these resources online. I have all these people to build my style after, like, okay, this person does this and this person does that. And there's so many that I can learn from. Staying on the topic of like all these new ways of the new medium is online. There's so many different ways for me to learn about this stuff. So I have so many sources teaching me these things. So what was it like, getting into the sports broadcasting world? How did you like figure out how to be you? How did you understand? How did you learn how to be a good sports broadcaster without all these countless sources telling you exactly what to do?
Oh, I like the segue and the tie-in, because we go back to what we just finished with having all the different sources, avenues, places to go to see things, learn things. Mm-hmm. All of that is wonderful. What you have to be careful of is too much. And what I mean by that is, let's keep it in the athletics world, okay? Mm-hmm. For all of those who are golfers out there, they'll get it. If you're a tennis player, I'm talking about these individual sports where you have your own personal coach for it, right? Mm-hmm. What if you had 5 or 6 different coaches, all of them giving you disparate ways of doing the exact same thing?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Now you're jammed up. All right. Now you're like, well, this one says left hand goes here. This says right hand goes here. This one says leg.
Yeah.
We call paralysis by analysis, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to all be careful about how much direction we're taking and where is it coming from, and make sure we're having consistency in all of it. So you mentioned finding your voice, right? Finding, how I can have an impact, how I can, produce my style. I think a lot of that comes from a little bit of trial and error, right? It comes from what you talked about, seeing other people doing things and saying, wow, I really like the way he does this. I really like the way she does that. I like the way that it goes across the board. But now getting it into my own voice, my own mannerisms, my own conviction. That's the thing, because none of us are going to be successful trying to just copy someone and saying, I want to be them and do it exactly like they do it. I have to do the essence of what they're selling us in my voice and my style and my medium. So I tell people all the time, you want to steal from all the best people out there, you can.
Yeah.
But take what works for you and find a way to reject what does not. But that doesn't mean what they're doing is wrong. It just means that doesn't fit you, doesn't fit your style. And then eventually your voice has to be the one. It has to be an authentic voice. I can do a killer impression of a number of different people, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just doing an impression of them. I'm not them. All right. Mm-hmm. Can I do my own impression of myself that is actually authentic? That's what we're all looking for, because that's how we get it. Use the influences, take the best you can get from them, but understand that ultimately it's you, your face, your ideas, your thoughts, your being that has to come off across the deal. And let's face it, the world knows when you're an imitator. They know when you're an imposter. They know when you're trying to do someone else. That doesn't work well. So unless we're all on Saturday Night Live doing sketch comedy of someone else, we got to find our own voice, our own way. And some of that is trial and error. We try different things. It doesn't work. Okay, try that. It doesn't work. Oh, that works. Boom. And then off you go.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. Having your own voice and having your own personality is super important in this business. But like, you had mentioned before, there are things you take from other people to implement into your style. So then my next question for you then is, who's been your biggest influence, throughout, your sports life, your broadcasting? Who's your biggest influence in helping you develop into who you are today?
Too many people to name, right? Too many people to thank. But at its core, it starts with my parents. I'm fortunate enough that they taught me what I think are a number of good things about how to live, how to do things, how to interact with people, and onward and upward. But in my broadcasting career, John Ward, the former voice of the Tennessee Volunteers, we lost him a couple of years ago, a huge influence on me, watching him work his craft, but the biggest teaching me how to work, how to prepare, how to research. Starting with someone like that, another man named Rob Reichley, who's the executive producer of Raycom Sports, daily basis, still teaching me lessons each and every day. I can bounce stuff off of him, and he gives me honest, expert feedback. So when I talked about having, don't have too many golf coaches, don't have too many swing coaches, Rob's my main swing coach,
Gotcha.
And that's wonderful to have. And then of course, everyone I've ever worked with, because everyone you work with leaves some type of an imprint on you, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it in between. Which one works best? What things do you take from them? And I'm thankful and grateful for everyone I've ever worked with, every man and woman that I've been involved with in the business. They've left something on me, something where I've either taken it, rejected it, kind of used it, thought that was a good thing. All of those things made me think in different ways, made me do different styles. So we could be here all day naming names, and I don't want to do that to you. But those were two of my main ones right from the beginning. And then I thank everyone who's given me an opportunity as well.
Absolutely. I like what you said about, everybody you work with has an impact on you, because that's, being young and just starting to get into this industry. The limited people I've worked with, every single one, there's something I've taken away and I've applied to myself. And, knowing that you've worked with so many different people now, you've had to have a lot of extensive, secrets and tips and knowledge for people getting into the industry. So my last question for you then is, what is the biggest advice you could give to somebody who's trying to get into the sports broadcasting industry?
Biggest piece of advice? Well, that's a great question. I appreciate you asking so many good ones along the way. But my biggest piece of advice is, number one, make sure that you know that this is your passion. Because this is a business of twists and turns. This is a business of challenges and bumps. This is a business of triumphs and occasional disasters. It's a business with all that. So every day you've got to wake up with the idea that this is what I really want to do, because everyone you meet is not going to tell you you're great. No more than everyone you meet is going to tell you you're terrible. What you want to find are the people who tell you why they thought something you did was great and why they thought something you did was terrible, because then you learn from them. So my biggest piece of advice is to make sure, number one, this is your passion, because if it is, you'll pursue it no matter what, right? You'll go through the bumps, you'll go through the challenges, you'll learn, you'll take the hit and come back the next day and be better. Those sorts of things. If you don't have the passion for it, this is not the business to be in. Because this is a very judgy business, okay? Everyone you run into is judging you. The person standing next to you doing a stand-up and a hit on something may not be your friend. They may be thinking they're in business or in competition with you, right? The producers, the directors, the people running the camera, the writers, everyone that you're involved with. We all have our own agendas and things that we want to accomplish as well. So my biggest piece of advice is, number one, make sure you have the passion for it. And then number two, make sure you're good to people. Be good to people. Be good to everyone around you, because everyone has a role in your success or your failure. And most of your failure you will bring on yourself. Your success, you'll need to share that with a lot of people. They'll make you look good from the makeup room all the way to the time you're out there. All right. Get to know who's running the cameras. Get to know who your stage manager is, right? Who drove you to your event, all of that. Have a good relationship and an appreciation, because those people matter. They matter in a big way. And, we've all heard the horror stories about the stars who, don't treat people very well.
Yeah.
The minute they're not stars, people can't wait to go out of their way to do things not for them, but against them. Do you really want to be that person? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. You've given me a lot of advice and a lot of insight that I definitely will take away from this, because you've had a lot of experience. That's a lot of really good information you have there, and it's really been a fantastic experience learning about your journey in the sports broadcasting world so far, Charles. But we're going to go ahead and start moving away from this segment and into the next. We're going to be moving towards our topic and issue of the day: pro athletes as role models. Should athletes have the expectation of being a good role model? We're going to be talking about this and more right after this short message.
You're in high school, serious about your future, and have a real desire to be near the action. Hi, Andrew Monaco, voice of the Texas A&M Aggies here. If you have an interest in a sports broadcasting career, the YSN Masterclass for high school students is your ticket. An online, on-demand series of video lessons conducted by sports industry professionals ready to help fast-track your sports broadcasting career. Learn more and register today at ysnacademy.com, ysnacademy.com.
And welcome back to the Teen Sports Podcast Network Illinois. I'm your host, Andrew Kish, currently here with Charles Davis, current analyst for the NFL on CBS. We just got finished talking about Charles's broadcasting journey, but now we're going to be getting into today's topic and issue of the day. Athletes as role models. Should athletes have the expectation of being a good role model? I have a lot of thoughts on this matter, but before we get heavy into discussion, I want to get your initial unbiased thoughts on this matter, Charles.
Yeah, I don't think that we can avoid it, Andrew, and I think that it's been something that's been around for as long as the term role models has existed. Should other people be role models? Should it be the people closest to you? If you're fortunate enough to have your parent, should it be a coach? Should it be your pastor? Should it be, right on down the line, right? So all those things kick in. I know that at one point there was a heavy debate when Charles Barkley was in his prime, and he said, I'm not your role model. Don't use me as your role model. I'm not that person. Other people would differ in how they look at it. To me, I think it comes with the territory. As long as we think in our society that sports or what we do has such a presence and has such an impact, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that if you're a parent and I make a mistake along the way, I'm the worst person that's ever existed. And boy, you've just destroyed everything for my kids. That's still your job to show your kids what right and wrong is, right? That's still your opportunity. But for me to just go through life and say, I'll do whatever I want, how I want, when I want, and not think that there's an impact out there somewhere that maybe people might think that's the way to do it when maybe it isn't the way to do it. I think that's being disingenuous, and I think that's running from what is really our responsibility. Again, I don't think holding me up and saying this is how you should be is probably what any parent should do. But maybe there's some aspects of what I do, how I do it, that might apply to your children, that might apply to the people that you're working with. And if so, that's terrific. Again, I don't think that I should be, absolved if I commit crimes. I don't think I should be absolved if I hurt people intentionally. I shouldn't be absolved of any of that. But at the end of the day, it is our problem. It is our thing. And I say our because I'm a parent as well. How do we to use those moments out there and work with our kids, the people closest with us, to say what we think is right or wrong and how we're going to live our life? I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's so funny to me how you brought up Charles Barkley, because that was going to be my first thing I mentioned. His quote exactly was, "Just because I can dunk a basketball doesn't mean I should raise your kids." And that's super notorious. Everybody thinks about that in this regard. And he does make some good points. Kids should have a role model that's close to them, a mom, a dad, a grandmom, granddad, aunt, uncle. You said a coach. Those are the people should look at, because athletes, they can they have a lot of characteristics that people will look up to, but it's, for a lot of individuals, it's something unrealistic, something they can't grasp. And I think it's super important that kids look at someone close to them. And unfortunately, the world is how it is. Not every single person is a good person, and athletes are just people. Not everybody's human. People make mistakes, and even if they are a good person as an athlete, they're under the telescope of social media, and just the media in general. There's a lot of different companies that thrive on people getting their clicks, looking at their links, and they will do whatever they can to get attention. And they LeBron James a few nights ago threw a basketball on the ground out of frustration, and my phone blew up with notifications from media sources saying, "Oh, LeBron James is angry. He's fed up with his teammates." And I'm like, got frustrated by a call, and he threw the basketball in the crowd. I know I've done that, but I didn't have a camera pointing at me, pointing it out, saying I'm a bad person for doing that. And I think that's something interesting to look at as well. Everybody makes mistakes, but if you have a role model as a parent, they are showing the best of themselves to you. You don't see every single thing they do.
Very true. And I think that it goes across lines as well, because we're in the sports world, right? That's the realm we're in right now. You and I are discussing that, whether it's broadcasting, whether it's the events that we would broadcast, the games that we're watching, all of those things. But role models exist everywhere. That role model might be your best friend and how he or she navigates life and does certain things and handles he or herself in a certain situation. That role model might be a teacher that you've had. That role model might be the janitor in your school who handles his or her work with quiet dignity. And they'd rather be doing anything but picking up your garbage every day. Yet they show up every day and do the job to the best of their abilities. There's something to be said for that. When in the business you and I are in right now, there are people who help make things happen for us. What about that camera person or that camera woman who's back there working each and every day, to make sure that you look right in the shot that's framing it up? That's a role model for you. Quiet dignity. It's not always the person out in front. It's not always someone like me who's yakking all the time on camera. A lot of times it's the people you don't see that are your best role models and how they do things, how they prepare every day, how they encounter different things and handle it, whether it's triumph or adversity. Well, the people who get together and say, okay, we have this project in 60 days. This is how we're going to get it done. And then find a way to get it done, even though they have 15 other things going on. I could go on all day, but role models exist all over the place. They're not just on television. They're not just people we don't know, right? But we hold up as the ideal. When I was a kid, the president of the United States, you should aspire to be the president. I don't know if everyone looks at it the same way, but it's still one of those offices that you say, hey, that's something to shoot for. I was fortunate enough that my parents understood that sports was important to me. And when I was in 6th grade, my teacher called him in and said, this is all he ever does is focus in on sports, and that's no way to go through life. And my father took offense at that. And it's like, what do you mean it's no way to go through life? There's opportunities in sports for people to do things. Being the president of the United States isn't the only way to have an impact on this world. And he told my 6th grade teacher that. Turned out my dad was right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at your career now. That's awesome that you had a figure like that at home supporting you. And I'm blessed myself. My parents are super supportive of my passions
and great role models for you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, look at now. I got my own podcast. I'm interviewing Charles Davis of the NFL on CBS. So
we're gonna raise the bar on that for you, Andrew. We're gonna get you better guests in the future. But at the same time, this is what it's all about. Your parents, indulging your passion, supporting your passion, but I'm sure also keeping an eye on your passion to make sure it still fits into everything else they want you to accomplish and what you need to accomplish in this great life too. So it's pretty neat to have those people around. And a lot of times we don't even recognize some of these role models until later on. So we'll see how that goes as well.
Absolutely. I appreciate your kind words. So another thing, on regards to, athletes as role models, one thing that I always think of is it's hard for, I know a lot of athletes don't want to be a role model, but they're kind of like a prototype role model. One thing that we're always, pushing on young people is, leadership skills, being able to have confidence, being able to put in hard work every day, being able to work as a team. That's exactly what athletes do every day. They show what hard dedication to a certain craft can give you, success in life, being able to achieve your dreams. They show youth how important it is to believe in themselves and those around them. And that's why I think it's super hard. Athletes are kind of in a tight spot because they're in a situation in which, they're doing all the things that young kids should be expected to do. But, on the other side, it doesn't make sense, because why do just athletes have this expectation? The average Joe, they work an office job, but they're successful. But they don't have those standards. They work as they please, and they don't have to act a certain way to be representative of the youth around here. And I think it's it's not just because, they're famous athletes that everybody knows, because, there's many entertainers out there who aren't, role models. There's musicians, entertainers, and, a lot of that industry has lots of problems with drugs and crime and a lot of immoral behavior. But I don't understand why athletes are the one medium that so many people expect they have to be a role model for our kids.
It's a good question. It's a tough one to ponder. I'll give it a short try here. Part of it is, for the most part, all of us grew up playing some sort of athletics, okay, or having to participate. Heck, we had to go to gym class. You may have hated it, right? Like whoever you are, you may have hated the idea, but gym class was part of the curriculum. So at some point, we all threw a ball, tried to catch a ball. We all had to run a lap. We all had to do those sort of things to varying degrees of success or failure. All right. That's just the way it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that athletics also forms a great fantasy world. There's a great book, a group of short stories called I think it was the Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And if you haven't read those yet, I highly advise you to get a copy and read them, because it takes us through who we all are as people. We all have thoughts in our heads about who we want to be. We all have those fantasy worlds about being someone else. We all want to be more famous. We all want to be more rich. We all want to be more beautiful. In my case, I want to be skinnier. I mean, all those things that go along with it. But read that book, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. They actually made it into a movie by Danny Kaye, but I think it's going to be too dated for you, Andrew. So read the book. All right.
Okay. Gotcha.
And it's a collection of short stories. So it's not something that should take up all your day, but I think you'll understand a little better about what I'm talking about after you read them. Look, everything that you've talked about the different things, it applies, but it also applies to even those places that we say don't have them as well. These musicians, these artists, these authors, they all carry a higher expectation of how they're supposed to live their life and who they're supposed to be. If a super famous entertainer donates money to a cause, you know how many people look at the money they donated and say, oh my God, that's all they gave? They could have given more. They're billionaires.
Yeah.
Okay, we all get involved in their lives that we have no business getting involved in making value judgments. But when you're in certain positions, you are held to a higher standard, and I don't back away from that. The people that taught us in school were held to a higher standard. They couldn't be out on a Wednesday night getting sauced at the local pub and have that get around town. Okay.
Yeah.
Although they were doing things as a private citizen, they had every right to do it. It would be frowned upon if my third grade teacher was getting sauced every Wednesday and having a great old time, right? That doesn't work very well for them. The mayor of your town, he or she in office, held to a higher standard. The chief of police, he or she, held to a higher standard of conduct and how they live their life, right? All those things that we may let slide with others, positions of authority or positions that we as a society have said, these are important to us. You are held at a higher standard. Now, I have seen in the last 20 years, that higher standard has been reduced some in different ways, maybe not held to it quite as much. And there are different times when I actually wonder if we're making a mistake by lowering the standard. I kind of like the standard being high. Doesn't mean I'm looking to, be able to do what I want when I want and not have any trouble for it. All right.
Yeah.
And I'm also not looking for someone else's misery. I don't want another scandal. I don't want someone out of office because we found notes between them and someone who's not their. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm just saying the way we live, the way we conduct, the way we do things, we're trying to do it the so-called right way. So show people how to get it done, and the right way should be rewarded. But as we learn, life isn't always fair. That's not always right either. Sometimes people come who are different, off the pace, different ways of doing things. They're the ones that seem to capture the fancy of other people, and we just have to learn to go with it. But I do think that if you do things, quote unquote, the right way every day with consistency, you got a chance to be pretty happy in this world of ours.
Yeah, I really like your points you made at the beginning, because so many people look at these people because, that's something we're all required to do, and something that a lot of people enjoy to do is athletics. And so many people, from a young age, from their parents are like, oh, you're super athletic, you're super talented, you're gonna be able to go pro, and then they have this expectation of, I got to get a college scholarship and, there's less work involved with that and I got to do this and I can become pro. And then they look up at these professional athletes and they think, okay, this is what I have to do. And you're right. There's people like teachers and politicians that are on our local level that, if they got caught doing these things, they'd be in trouble. I mean, obviously it's not illegal or technically wrong because we all, go out and have fun sometimes. But when they're in a more of like a mentorship role or a representative role, they have to be a outstanding citizen. But, again, athletes are just people that are super good at sports.
Yep.
And they're playing for the world to see. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that kids need to have more down-to-earth role models. Like I mentioned at the beginning, a mother, a father, uncle, a coach, anybody who is close to them.
Yeah.
And family should be the ones teaching, okay, you have to do the right things. You need to care for people around you. You need to do hard work to have success in life.
Yeah, Andrew, I think you want people who are close to you. Not everyone's going to have family. We're not all that fortunate, right? People lose family along the way. So who steps in and fills the void? Who fills the breach? We've heard that from a lot of people who've been extremely successful in this world who have come from really, really tough beginnings. And then we have others who have had everything handed to them the right way, the right schools, the right money, the right everything, that don't achieve those heights. Why? That's always the question that we have. Where's the motivation? Where's the hunger? Where's all of that? But, the role model part of it is difficult because if I'm just your local person working on my 9-to-5 job every day. Let's say that I count widgets every day at the company. Okay. No one's at home sitting there going, God, I wish I had Charles Davis's job counting widgets at the factory every day. That would be wonderful. Okay. So that kind of takes me out of the so-called role model deal, right? Because no one's sitting there saying, I got to be like that. But here's my kicker. Let's say now Charles from the factory counting widgets is now coaching Andrew's kid in Little League Baseball at 12 years old. I've become a role model because your kid, son or daughter, is now part of my responsibility when I have this team. And how am I conducting myself? What tone am I setting? What culture am I creating? How am I interacting with the parents? What am I doing with these young people when they're out on the field? Do I look after them? Do I take care of them if they get hurt? Am I teaching them all the right things? Good sportsmanship, all of that. Guess what? Charles counting widgets at the factory, all of a sudden is a role model because your kid's interacting with Charles every day. Your kid's coming home and telling you stories about how Charles did things. And if Charles is out there like Mr. Buttermaker in Bad News Bears and I'm taking a nip in between pitches, that's probably not a good role model you want to have. But if all of a sudden I got stuck at the office and I can't pick up my kid on time and Charles brings your kid home for you, whoa. That's pretty cool, right? So it's all those things in between. But any one of us in any station of life, you're often moved to being a role model based on what you're doing in your world. And just me counting those widgets at the factory, that means nothing to anyone. But if I'm coaching your kid in Little League, now you want to know if I've got what you think is the right character, the right stuff, that my kid should be with you every day. I've taken on more responsibility. I've become a role model.
So yeah, no, I agree completely with everything you've had to say. And I one thing I think a lot of kids should strive for is being the best version of themselves. One thing that, I know, Andrew Monaco, one thing he has always said to me is you got to be the best you. There's Stephen A. Smiths, there's Charles Davis out there, but you shouldn't strive to be them. You should take things away, like you had mentioned earlier in the first half. There's things that you can take from people to learn, but you should always strive to be the best version of yourself. Take things away from people, that you think are qualities you want to have, but don't try and be that person.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to do. I mean, and we've all gone through it, right? I think back to, since I'm 57, my time frame obviously is different than yours, and how I was raised and my culture was different than the one you've come up in. For us, certain TV shows were appointment viewing, right? Must see Thursday night, you got to be there because if you didn't get that episode then, you didn't get it again until the summer on the reruns. All right. Now you're like, I don't need to tune in anytime except when I'm good and ready. And I punched up in that program and down, and boom, I can watch them all at one time. Neither side is better than the other, although I would lean towards your side being a heck of a lot better because of convenience and how you do things and all that. But my point being, with our cultures and how we were raised and what we saw and how we did things, they may be different, but it still applies that you're searching for your authentic self. You're searching for who you're going to be at a certain point. We don't come out fully formed. Okay. We come out, we're that lump of clay that has to be fully formed, and life is going to do that for us. So by the time we get wired to a certain point where all of our stuff is kind of in there, and you'll continue to refine and get better and all that, but there will hit that point where it's like, boom, this is pretty much who you are. Okay. Now, how do you make those things better? Emphasize those things you're good at, de-emphasize those things you're not so great at, all of that. That's where the journey is. That's where the journey goes on. And that's why the journey truly never ends, because there's always a new way, a better way, change how you do things, but it gets harder and harder to do the older and older you get. Right. Yeah. The reason we talk about people being entrenched in who they are, there's a reason why one day you're going to come visit me and I'm going to be the one in my rocking chair, and I'm not going to change what I'm going to do because I'm 75 years old and I don't need to now. That sort of a deal. Although plenty of 75-year-olds can continue to grow and change and get better. So we'll just keep fighting a good fight. We'll keep working at it. And as I said, you don't know where your role model is going to pop up from. You don't know who your role models are going to be. You don't know who you're going to want to adopt things from. But you know it when you encounter it. You know it when you see it. You know it when you get it. And that's why I say the people in their private lives, in their regular lives, they may be one thing. But when they take on other things, when they now take on a group of people, or a leadership role, or being out in front of something, they then take on being a role model. Now you judge what you think that role model is supposed to be. And we all have to do that each and every day.
Absolutely. Well, Charles, you really have had some fantastic points, and you brought up some things I've really never thought about regarding this topic and issue specifically. We are reaching the end of our show, though, so before I go ahead and wrap things up, is there any final remarks you want to give to our viewers and listeners today?
No, I mean, my final remarks are very simple. Number one, thank you for having me on. It's been a fun conversation with you. Number two, I wish you all the best and continued success as you continue to traverse this broadcast field and world and learn and do all the things and chase your passion and pursue your goals. I wish you all the best in doing that. And, it is fun to watch now and to look back and realize how I came up to get into this medium is a whole different way than how you're coming up and getting into it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. A lot of times when we're older, we want to look at what comes behind us and criticize it. Yeah. Well, there's criticism of everything. They criticize the way we came up. Okay. That's part of the deal. But at the end of the day, this is exciting as heck. We got a chance to find more and more people who have good things to say, good values to impart, good ways for us to do things. And they can get their voices out there a heck of a lot faster than we ever could. It's up to us as a society to figure out which ones we're taking that are good and which ones we're like, whoa, that's not going to work so well, as well as it is for those people who are working on it. So I'm excited for you. Congratulations on everything, and continued success as you continue to make your mark.
Thank you so much. Your kind words mean a lot. Well, Charles, I just want to thank you for joining me today. But before I let you go, is there any way my viewers and listeners can find you online?
Not online. I am not on social media. I am totally off of that. So, by the way, no one would have anything that they want to follow me for anyway. I'm bored to get out. But yeah, I'm lucky enough. I'm still with the NFL on CBS. I'll be back again this fall. Looking forward to that. I do things for CBS HQ, which you can find online and be able to pull up different segments there. I continue to voice the Madden football game with my partner, Brandon Gaudin. We hopefully will be around for at least another year or so. So we're excited about that. And NFL Network getting ready for the draft. So all the draft coverage, make sure you tune in to NFL Network for that, because I'm part of a group I think brings you the best draft coverage. So those are the types of things in ways you'll be able to find me. Social media and all that, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, I'm not there. There'll be other people that you'll be able to see. Although I'm sure the different companies I work for may have a clip or two of mine on there along the way.
Sounds great. That's all, though. That's our show for today. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Teen Sports Podcast Network, Illinois. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, all at TSPN Podcast. I'm your host of the Teen Sports Podcast Network, Illinois, Andrew Kish. Thanks for tuning in.